Hello and welcome back to Shite Talk, an Irish history podcast. Welcome back. How are you getting on? It's been a while, maybe a couple of months, weeks at this stage, possibly, I'd say you call it months at this stage, but we're back, and we're back with a special. So I think this is technically the end of season 5, I don't know. I've done an episode about the financial crash. It started off as an episode about the Anglo banker David Drum, and then it morphed into an episode about Sean Quinn, mostly. And once again, I've spent the last month reading far too much about what was supposed to be a one-part special episode. So now it's turned into 3 parts, which is even better. So the first part is going to be about Sean Quinn, mostly his rise and then involvement with Anglo-Irish Bank. And the second one is mostly about the bank and Sean Quinn in and around 2008, 9, 10, the time of the financial crash. And then the third part, and this is where I have to level with you before you start into this, the third part is going to be behind a paywall. So to listen to part 3, you'll have to head over to our Patreon, which is the first time that we've done a Patreon exclusive in the, 60 odd episodes we've done. It's partially as a marketing tool. We put a lot of work into these ones. They cover a lot of stuff. I think they're really interesting. We've put a lot of hours into this, the researching, the recording, the editing, and I think they're really interesting. And it is a crazy story. So there's, an element of us wanting to get a little paid for this, but also the third one, it deals with more current affairs. So the third one is mostly about the sort of aftermath of the financial crash and stuff that's still ongoing. So it involves a lot of ongoing legal cases with fairly litigious people and various paramilitary groups that are still in operation. So it's definitely worth a listen, but if that doesn't pique your interest, then that's grand. You can just listen to part 1 and part 2 for free. That'll still be a really interesting story. It's pretty much a whole story in itself, and all pretty crazy. And then if you don't want to listen to the third part after that, that's grand too. I mean, you'll be missing out on some of the most salacious stuff, but you'll still have heard a really interesting story. And if you do want to listen to part 3 and support the two of us and this podcast, you can head over to Patreon for the third episode. And that's pretty much it. That's the pitch. We decided to be upfront about it instead of sneaking it in at the end of one of the episodes that you suddenly have to pay for it. So if you want to make the choice not to start listening to this story so that you don't have to pay for anything ever, that's fair enough. We'll be back to releasing the regular free episodes in a couple of weeks in the middle of June. But if you're on board, then here we go. Here's the episode. Although, before we start the episode, our good friend, silent producer Dan Smith, has made us a special intro for these Cowboy episodes that we're going to use from now on, which is fantastic. We gave him very little direction. I was like, what if we had our song, but like more cowboy? And then he went and made us this great fireside ballad song. And I was like, yeah, but like more yee-haw, you know what I mean? That just giving him nothing, being absolutely useless. And he still managed to deliver us this fantastic intro. So if you too would like an intro, you can get in contact with Dan, go onto the Instagram at Shite Talk History, or email us at shitetalkhistory@gmail.com. And we'll pass on the message to him. Or you can check out Dan's band Sync. So here's Dan's special cowboy intro, followed by episode 1 of the Shite Talk Cowboy Special Part 2. Sean Quinn.
Brown envelopes on the table, you know how it goes. The old fable, that's for no one else to know. Taking the cash, hand on the fist, with McCoy's gangster list. Stories of cowboys that dwell in the land, beg, steal, and borrow with salutes and scam. The kind that pull the wool over your eyes, take your shirt off your back and call this surprise. Solid names and cover-ups full of allies and allies. Deceivers, cheats, and don't forget the lies, lies, lies.
Sean Quinn was born in Timor in County Fermanagh in the year of 1946. The nearest hub was Derry Lynn, a one-street town about a mile from the Cavan border. Sean was the fifth generation of the Quinn family to be born in the same small farmhouse. He didn't get on at school. He didn't like it. At one point, when he was supposed to be taking his last exams, he hid in a bush and then just walked back home. Was like, I missed the bus, which is...
I like it. Aim for the bushes. He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. I think his mother was annoyed at him, but his dad was like, sure, he's built for farming anyway.
A bird in the hand is worth one Mitchin schoolboy in the bush.
Yeah, but it must have been like his final exams to get out of primary school or whatever they had in the north at the time, because he dropped out at school at 14 anyway and went to help his dad on the farm.
Didn't even finish the inter-cert.
No, or the star cert or whatever the hell they had back then. He was a gay man, and himself and his brother Peter both played for the Timor Shamrocks. The Timor Shamrocks, I'll be saying that wrong for a while, doesn't matter.
I know. To be honest, at this stage, I'd say just admit that you're wrong and say it's Tremor.
Tremor, yeah.
Timor-Leste, is that where he's from?
Yeah, East Timor. But himself and his brother were both gay players. His brother Peter headed off to college to become an accountant, and their sisters had already left to become teachers. So when their dad died in 1967, Sean was left in charge of the 23 acres of stony Fermanagh land.
Oh, you'd be dead proud though, wouldn't you, as an Irish dad back in the day? The kids you have to rear them all to the point of which they're off being, nurses and
teachers and
accountants,
yeah.
And you have one left on the farm.
Yeah,
you get, that's pretty much if you did have a nurse and a guard and a priest, that's everything an Irish family could hope for.
So you're
saying a hairdresser and a mechanic as well, just for
just to round it out,
handing the sake.
They would be the artistic members of the family. That's the 1960s equivalent of going to art school. But so you're saying he was like, job's done. My work here is done, and he just died.
Yes, I think that's how most Irish dads pass.
Yeah, probably.
And the reason why people the average age of life expectancy today, Kevin, has gone up so much is because of lazy children.
Disappointed fathers who can't die because their children won't work the land.
They're just waiting there to go off to the netherworld like Frodo. I'm done. I just want to sit back in my chair and just think about times gone by, the better times. But no, I'm stuck here.
Well, so Sean found himself at 21. He was an undereducated farmer in charge of some rocks in a border town with fuck all prospects.
Now, Kev, I'll say this now. You're saying undereducated in book learning.
That's true, but he's overeducated in street smarts.
I was going to say streets, and then you make this place sound very farmland.
He knows the two streets of Derry Lynn, and that's all he needs to know. So there's not much going on at the time, and then just to add a bit of spice, a bit of variety, Jason, the Troubles kick off. So that's where he's at. But he does well enough out of it. By 1973, he's 27 at this stage. Quinn was captain of the Fermanagh football team. He'd started dating his future wife, Patricia Quinn, who had the same last name, but they were no relation. I think she was from Galway, maybe.
Okay, because I've heard the way you'd said that, you were like, he'd started dating his, and then paused. I was like, don't say family member. Don't say.
Yeah. So, he's captain of the football team. He's got a wife. And then he comes up with the idea to dig gravel out of the ground and sell it to people.
Now, for what purposes?
That was your opportunity to say pretty groundbreaking stuff.
It was, and
I tee you up. Now, you set them down.
You tee them up. I walk by them, turn around, and go, "Oh shite!" I was on my phone.
Left them there, and I tidy them away. What were you saying? For what purpose was he digging up quarry?
Yeah, what was the? Oh, that's what it was quarrying. Then is what we're talking about.
He started a quarry.
But is he doing the roads? Is he doing what's he building?
We'll get to that. What isn't he building is the question. But Well, he starts. He didn't come up with the idea, I suppose.
Directly before we started this podcast, you said, "No, Jason, this might sound like something the teacher might tell you, but feel free to ask questions because there's a lot to this." One question in, shut your mouth, Brennan. You'll never amount to anything. You're lucky you're still here. Go to the detention office. Like, what are we? Just answer my question. What's he doing?
I meant feel free to ask questions when we get into bond derivatives and high-end trading later on. Not why how is a man digging rocks out of the ground.
What do
What's
stones
he doing? What
do?
are they for? Where do they come from? Does he farm them?
I don't know. What do you got going on over there? Are there different kinds of stones? Do they change colour when you put water on them?
I'm not a geologist. You gotta feed me the answers here.
Never mind a geologist. I'm not some kind of rock scientist.
He started, so he's all he's got is a bit of land that his dad left him. Anyone who's been in Fermanagh or read any of Patrick Kavanagh's moany poems about Monaghan, the land's not great. He wouldn't be able to grow anything or such. But he worked with what he had. He could wank on it as he did. But there's a lot of other people in the locale digging up gravel. But he got £100 loan at the time and used it to dig a well so that he could wash the gravel on site. And between that and his GA connections, Sean Quinn Quarries Limited had the competitive edge in the region.
Limited?
Yeah.
He should have had more confidence in himself from the beginning.
Sean Quinn Quarries Unlimited was already taken. His quarry business spanned both sides of the border, and he was taking out sand and gravel from his 23-acre farm and supplying it to local builders. He then created Quinn Cement to start making concrete locally. And soon he was the man to see about stone, gravel, sand, roof tiles, or cement blocks. So at that time, it must be the early 80s, as part of Thatcherite economics in the north, there was no tax on profits reinvested into the business. So you could just put 100% of the money they made back into building stuff.
Yeah, and there was no jungle canyon rope bridges either, I'd heard.
There was no jungle canyon rope bridges. So it's a good time if you got a bit of money. Not a good time if you want to upkeep Jungle Canyon rope bridges. There was also no trade unions at the time, and none of his employees had salaries. They were all paid based on productivity, so everyone was on commission. So those are two of the cornerstones to getting rich.
Oh,
there'd be more stone jokes to go. But I guess, as we go on in this story, everyone will talk about how he's a great man for what he'd done. And he is, he's a good businessman. But he didn't come out of a vacuum, I guess. These are two solid rules for getting rich. Don't pay taxes and don't give your employees salaries or benefits. So, as the 80s went on, things were pretty shit in the country. It was the recession all across Ireland. And it was particularly shit in Fermanagh because it was on the border, so instead of just being neglected by one government, it got to be neglected by two governments.
Nice. It's like the child of an Irish divorce.
Yeah, instead of getting spoiled by two parents, it's just equally neglected by both.
There's children in Ireland looking at American TV in their youth. You think, you get 2 Christmases, 2 birthdays, 2 everything. Irish parents get divorced and you just get left out in the road.
Yeah, both of them forget to pick you up from school.
You take him. No, you take him. No, it's your weekend. No, it's yours.
The IRA and the UDR were busy shooting each other and taking out reprisal attacks. But in the middle of all that misery and violence was Sean Quinn and his construction operation, providing a load of jobs. As the business grew through the 80s, so did his family. He had 5 kids with his wife Patricia, 4 girls and a boy.
Was the boy last?
The boy, was he last? He might have been. He was called Sean Quinn Jr. anyway, which is a classic.
The fact that that's his name makes me think he was last and he was just going to keep going until he had a lad.
Yeah, sure, yeah, that's what So, yeah, the IRA had a habit of killing people in the area that were seen to be dealing with British security forces. There was some sort of barracks station in Fermanagh, but Quinn never had any trouble with it. He was a bit of a nationalist himself. There was a story that he told, I think, but he was trying to cross the border one day to go to the funeral. Where he is right on the border, so a lot of the stuff he'd have to do, you have to go through a British checkpoint at the time. And even though, his name was on all these trucks that were driving around all the time, they sort of pulled him to the side of the road and left him there for about 20 minutes while he was on his way to a funeral. and he was starting to get thick, and like they weren't dealing with him, and he was just left on the side of the road. And eventually, after about half an hour, he just pushed the army officer, I guess, out of the way, hopped into his car and drove through the checkpoint. And the soldiers did nothing, which was a big deal in the area. So this was sort of when that story made it around the whole town, and he became something of a well, he was already like a big man around town. Now he's something of a legend.
Is he kind of like the lad who owns the town in Roadhouse?
Oh yes, absolutely. He's like the Marconi of Cavan.
Gotcha. But tell me this, and why didn't the army just let him through in the first place?
I guess they wanted to like sort of put him in his place, but he was also, even at this stage, he's now seen as like, if anything happened to him, the local area would be fucked in terms of jobs. He was sort of the only thing at that time keeping the place together. So they kind of wanted to put him, take him down a peg, but they also, I guess, knew that they couldn't really do anything to him.
Yeah, take him down a rung, or no, not two. Don't.
Jesus Christ, I don't want to get shot in my bed. But now this is pure conjecture, pure me talking. But at this stage, he's a very wealthy man. He has a quarry business that presumably involves importing explosives from time to time, having them drive through border checkpoints.
Near the border of the north.
Near the border of the north, it's possible that certain groups would find that, interesting to be able to get explosives through the border without anyone checking them.
Like rock bands.
Like
for
rock
their
bands.
like pyrotechnics and such.
Exactly. You wouldn't want to get tied up in red tape. At the time, the IRA was doing tiger kidnappings of everyone who had a bit of cash in order to extract money from them. Never bothered.
Is that why they're going extinct?
That's why they're going extinct. They kept kidnapping tigers for cash. But that's just me talking. No, nothing's ever been proved or even suggested. But anyway, so Quinn pushed people to deliver their best. He was charming, but also instilled fear in people. If you like playing ga and drinking pints, you get on grand with him. But if you didn't, you wouldn't last long around him. Just like a sound, terrifying countryman.
But he's never left his town, I imagine, at this stage, where it's kind of like...
No, he's a local legend.
Yeah. I imagine, say, like Mick Wallace would be seen the same in whatever part of Wexford he's from.
Yeah, he was just the big man about town,
Yeah, there's not too many millionaires that are known around Ireland. Where you're
No.
kind of like, oh yeah, that's Offaly's millionaire.
Yeah, sure, you can name them all in a very short list, but he's starting to get rich in the 80s, but he doesn't show it much. He's not into flashy stuff. He dresses mutely. He doesn't really act like a boss, but he's got the money.
Well, Jesus, Kev, the greatest trick the devil ever played was making the world think he didn't exist.
Well, there you go. But in 1984, he bought the Cat and Cage. Do you know the Cat and Cage there in Drumcondra? It would be near DCU.
I do.
Yeah. So apparently he bought it because anytime you go down, it's right beside Croke Park in Dublin, and anytime you go down to watch Fermanagh play, he had awful time finding a seat to just get a quiet pint. So we bought the bar.
Well, I'd say it probably turns a profit too. It's a popular place, but it's a nice pub.
It is. He also bought Quinn's pub there in Drumcondra, which makes sense in retrospect.
Well, I was about to say,
that was like a big nightclub when we would have been in DCU, and that would have
never went. Do you know
no,
why?
It was for the country folk.
It was for the country folk,
of
which I was one.
Yeah,
but,
so was I. We were reinventing ourselves.
Yeah, we're reinventing, but also it's kind of like, no, we're country folk, but we got to Dublin thinking we're not country folk.
Exactly,
we're better than these, and then you get there and it's a stark awakening where you're like, no, Paddy, okay, you're also Irish. Listen, country Paddy.
I'm actually living in the big city. I have spent this entire year in Santry and still don't know how the Dublin bus operates. But that's so all this stuff would have been happening. Like, people would have been going to Quinn's nightclub like 3-4 times
all
a week
the time
during all this, when all this stuff was kicking off. But anyway, yeah. So around 1989, Quinn wanted to expand again, and he planned on opening a cement factory in Derry Lynn to start providing cement to the north and south. There was basically only one company doing that at the time. They were supplying the whole island, called Irish Cement, and Quinn undercut them and took over like 22% of the market. His method was, and this is the sort of method he would use for all of his future endeavors, he would just spend a load of money on the best machinery, then undercut the competition and win over customers with his Quinn charm.
Quinn charm, quality product, and he probably, well, you know, what's it called, like a loss leader, isn't it? If you just cut out that for ages, you make a slight profit or lose money,
Yeah,
but then
yes.
just get rid of everyone else in the market and then
Exactly,
slowly
yeah.
increase, and in 20 years' time, you're going to be huge.
That was his thing, yeah. He just like, and especially as he went on and he had more money to draw from, he just spend a shit ton of money on like high-end equipment and then hope for the best. As his businesses grew through the 80s, he diversified with the Quinn Group. The Quinn Group is like the umbrella term for all the companies he has. He got into the hospitality industry with Quinn Hotels, the glass and plastics game with Quinn Glass, and Quinn Light Pack in Longford. He also got into renewable energies with Quinn Energy, disposable waste with Quinn Environmental, and got into the road building game with Quinn Tarmac. He loves his own name.
He does. Now tell me this, you've not referenced Quinnsworth.
I
Or
don't think
Super
that
Quinn.
was- No, Super Quinn wasn't him. That was another guy.
Was Quinnsworth? Was that a thing that I remember from the past?
Yeah, Quinnsworth. Was that a...
I shouldn't have to ask you, is it something that I remember from the past?
Is this one of my memories?
Pat Quinn, businessman.
Owen Quinnsworth.
Yes.
I'd say it would have
Irish.
been... Quinn would have been raging that he didn't own Super Quinns. Like, that would have been... He would have loved that.
He also, he was mad so he could have four sets of twins.
The Quinn twins. The Quinn tuplets.
Yes.
um,
He just wanted that old, classic, standard, quintessential Irish family.
yes, yeah. You just wanted...
I can go all day.
Well, you're going to have to. We're going to need to keep these Quinn puns going. But in 1991, he opened up his flagship hotel, the Sleeve Russell, on the Cavan Fermanagh border where he'd grown up. By the mid-90s, he had 12 pubs, 7 hotels. He focused on pubs without car parks, as he reckoned there'd be a drink-driving ban at some point in the near future, and pubs that focused on car traffic would suffer.
This man is clever.
Pretty, yeah. That is, you know, that's pretty smart.
But also, it seems pretty smart because you've said it now, but then with 5 seconds of that knowledge, I'm like, wait, hold on, did he just
Yeah.
look at what Europe was doing before?
Or even
And
look
then
out in
we
the
just did
road as more and more people had cars and they're like getting in behind the wheel after 10 points and driving into a hedge. He's like, I don't know if it'll last.
Yeah. We might be coming to the end of this era. Any decade now.
Yeah, he's probably like in 20 to 30 years, I'm sure there'll be mutterings of it. But he was, with all of his businesses going on, he had a lot of machinery and trucks and stuff, and he was sick of dealing with insurance companies to try and insure all of his trucks and pubs and such. So in 1996, he opened Quinn Direct Insurance, a branch of his new Quinn Financial Services. He did the usual trick of undercutting and focused on young car drivers that were getting fleeced everywhere. So by the end of 1997, he had about 2% of the market. But his competitors publicly questioned, how could he stay afloat if his main income was riskier young drivers? How would he have enough money set aside to cover the payouts? But details are for nerds, Jason. Quinn Financial Services also opened Quinn Life, offering life insurance policies and investment opportunities. For whatever reason, Quinn had purposely avoided investing in tech during the late 90s, so he managed to dodge the dot-com bubble, where people heavily invested in websites thinking that they'd all take off and make money, and then they lost a shit ton of money when people were like, how?
Still figuring that out today.
Yeah, it still doesn't make any, like, Facebook is worth 100 billion. How? Well, I suppose they sell our data, that's much more obvious, but
Yeah, it's pretty...
back in the early 90s, it was like pets.com. We valued it at $1 billion. Great. Okay, now what does it do? Well, you can look at pictures of your pets, and then the whole thing collapsed. So he manages to avoid that, but after the dot-com bubble bursts and everything's on the downturn, he then invests in dot-com websites thinking that there'll be a bounce back. So I can't figure him out at many points in this thing, because he seems smart enough to have dodged it the first time, and then when it's collapsing, he's like, this is the time to get in on pets.com.
I imagine it's like a drop in the ocean for him, where he's like, comes back in and buys it when it's all gone to shite, and then, but it never really, it didn't really turn around though, so I imagine he probably sold it at the same money or lost a little bit. He lost
a good bit of money on this, and
how much did he buy? Did he buy the internet? Did he just buy everything?
I'll tell you now. I think he put in 50 million odd. Like, he put a lot of money into it. Yeah, like big boy money. But there was an issue with that, which we'll get into in a second, I guess. But so as predicted by his competitors, Quinn Insurance lost a load of money on claims, 38.5 million in total. By that time, one of the early employees of Quinn Insurance, 31-year-old Kevin Lunny, was running the business day to day, but Sean Quinn was like the ultimate director. He was the one calling the shots. And under his direction, they'd failed to keep enough money aside to cover the claims because they'd invested it all in .com stocks. He took all the money from the insurance. You know, when you get insured, you pay a premium, but the insurance business is supposed to wait a couple of years before they claim that as profits to see like how much they have to pay back in claims.
Yeah, just in case, accidents happen like they do.
Yeah, which is the whole point of the thing. But what he was doing is once the money came in, he was just like, that's pure profit, baby.
That's mine now.
Put it on .coms.
It would be a great system if nothing bad ever happened in the world.
Yeah.
Like if we didn't need insurance, like if there was no reason for having insurance, then the insurance racket would be a great racket.
When they gave me this money, I didn't think anything bad would happen. I just thought I could have the money.
But it must be a weird wait. It's kind of like when you're waiting there for the final game of Accumulator to come off, and you're just like, because he's sat there with all this money, and he's just kind of waiting then for a year to go, oh, I hope, fucking, come on, don't, no, shite. 50 people crashed their cars.
Yeah.
Into each other. It was a derby.
Yes, he was probably out in the streets just yelling at lads, but like, slow down, boys. That's probably why he stopped investing in pubs with car parks. He was trying to save his overhead. But so you're supposed to keep this money as reserve so that you have to have a certain amount, a percentage of money in order to cover the claims. That's like one of the big rules in the insurance game. And he hadn't done that. Instead, he'd taken the money and gambled it all on pets.com or whatever. But because this is Ireland in the Celtic Tiger days, there was no real punishment.
I want to know what these websites are. What did he buy? You know what websites he bought, or are you saving this for later?
No, I don't even understand it really. There's so much happening in this story. I couldn't get into the .com bubble, but it seemed like people were like investing in websites because they thought websites were inherently worth money. And then once the madness sort of died down, they're like, well, how does pets.com make money? And then it just crashed.
But yeah,
and then after that happened, he was like, now's the time. Now's the time to get in on it.
But with everything else, that is true. It's like, it's just not with the .com.
Not when something's been discovered to be worthless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When there's a bit of a dip, you're like, it'll bounce back. But like, people genuinely way overestimated what this was worth. It's worth nothing.
Oh no, of course. It's the internet. It's not worth, like...
I'm going to guess he put all of his money in the Space Jam website. But, so... he committed like the cardinal sin of the insurance game, but because it was the Celtic Tiger times, there was no official regulator for insurance. This is something we've talked about a lot. It was handled by the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, which was run by Mary Harney at the time, and she decided not to punish Quinn because he was a net positive for the industry. He was keeping prices down, keeping people employed.
So now he's just taking his, like, what he was getting in his small town. He's just doing that on a national level.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah,
great.
He's just
no, you're too big. He's too big to fail. I know it's not fair. It's not very moral. But look, he's too big to fail. We're going to have to pull him out of this.
Well, we didn't make the rules clear when this man who has no accounting or actuarial experience came into the game. It's not fair to punish him for something he didn't understand. He didn't know you couldn't just take out a whole load of money. So the punishment, they didn't even punish him. They just said you have to put 55 million back into the insurance to like make it solvent. You have to put that into your own company. So he turned to the only lender in town for cool up-and-comers like himself, Anglo-Irish Bank. They were a new bank full of young execs who were funneling money into the booming property market. Just teeing it up.
Sorry, I can't.
All the pieces are there.
Oh, Christ, this is going to be a fun series.
So, like, right, at the time, Anglo were getting rich off the back of the property boom. They were quickly establishing themselves as a force to rival Bank of Ireland and Allied Irish Bank. So Bank of Ireland and Allied Irish Bank were like the old dinosaurs of the industry. And for some reason, being old fuddy-duddy when it came to, like, saving money, that wasn't cool in the early 2000s. You needed to be exciting. You need to be making risky ventures. If you were just save a penny, keep a penny, bullshit, that was all done with. In January 2005, Sean Fitzpatrick moved up to the chairman position of Anglo-Irish Bank, and his protege, David Drum, took over as the chief executive of Anglo. So these two are like the dream team.
In fairness, he'd been beaten on about that for ages.
Banging the same old drum. I listened to an interview with Simon Carswell on the Eamon Dunphy show. What's it called? The Last Stand?
Yes.
His podcast.
It is. I would highly recommend everyone to go listen to the cocaine episode.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. It's phenomenal. Like, he gets to interview people about the cocaine industry in Ireland and stuff, and it's... I think at one point he might even say it. I don't know if it's in that podcast or if it's in something else I've heard him say before, because he's obviously openly admitted to it before. But he's like, no, eventually I just had to give up the cocaine because he just couldn't get any good stuff in Ireland. Remember he had a TV show on TV3 where he was interviewing people and he said he was going to take over the Late Late. It was going to be bigger than the Late Late. It lasted like one.
A coked up Eamon Dunphy is exactly what we need for the Late Late Show. But he was interviewing Carswell was on his show talking about this sort of stuff, and I think Dunphy asked him, and it's fair to say that David Drum would have been Sean Fitzpatrick's protege. And then Carswell was like, yes, he would have been his protege. I was like, don't call out the man like that. Come on.
Leave it go, yeah. Just don't.
Don't correct the man's French.
Well, pardon my French, but go feck yourself.
So, under Sean Fitzpatrick, the bank had gone from strength to strength, largely on the back of providing loans to the property developers, stuff that AIB and BOI thought was too risky. Between himself and David Drum, they were coming up with brilliant ideas, such as housing estates were being sold so quickly. Developers would build housing estates. People would be queuing up, sleeping in their cars in order to be the first ones there to buy the houses. But building houses is a slow game, Jason. So the banks were like, right, why don't we just assume that when you build an estate, everything gets sold for full price, and then we'll just put that money on the books. And then since we have that money on the books, we'll just put that towards your next development project. And then also that development project will assume you'll sell all them. So you have that money already. It's already in the bank. And, you just keep doing that a couple of times for 7 years. And that's how you get ghost estates.
Yeah. Why did I have a question though, because you've obviously done a lot of research into this in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Why did we knock the estates?
See, this is the thing that I kept thinking when I was reading this part of the story. How, because all this stuff seems like ages ago, but it was all 15 years ago. How have we ended up
Not even. Not even. Yeah. It was 10 years ago they were knocking houses.
But in our lifetime we've had two main crises to do with housing, in that there was too many houses and now there's no houses. How did we end up getting fucked both ways within the space of 10 years?
I think because they're both one and the same. There was we have way too many houses. Okay, we have no houses. Okay, we have houses. They're in places people don't want to live.
Yeah. So, yes, this was the new way of lending. This is what the boys are bringing to the table. Just fucking keep the money pumping out. Don't worry about what's in the bank.
You're stimulating the economy.
Yes, people are building houses. Why do people need to own 4 homes in Leitrim? Shut the fuck up. So that same year, 2005, after a series of investments, takeovers and expansions, Quinn Group was now running a load of thriving businesses, and Sean Quinn himself was valued at around €3 billion. Not bad.
For a man who came from gravel.
He'd managed to create an empire supplying building supplies during a time of unprecedented construction, and as a side hustle, he was running an insurance business at a time when everyone in the country was getting rich enough to buy cars.
And insurance.
That was a novelty at the time. By 2005, he was up to 14% share in the insurance market. He got his edge by responding to claims quickly and efficiently, which he could do because all of his claims managers were self-employed contractors rather than employees. So they're just encouraged to settle things quickly and cheaply rather than go to court. So what I'd read was that he'd sort of challenge everything until it was going to go to court, and then he'd settle. Which is a model that fucks everybody over.
Okay, but for the listeners, how?
Well, as in, so then if you have a legitimate claim, you have to struggle to get paid, and it's only at the last minute they're like, okay, we'll settle, and you get paid less than what you're due. And if you're a chancer, then they also settle before you go to court. So,
yes.
It's sort of the worst parts of...
It is, but then also you can just bring them to court.
Yeah.
I know that's not fair.
Oh, you could, yes.
It's
but it's sort of the whole point.
You shouldn't have to do that. The reason you pay for the insurance is that you don't have to do that. But yeah.
Exactly. So you don't have to, if you crash your car, you can get the money immediately to fix your fucking door, not go through a lengthy court battle with one of the richest men in the country.
What country did you grow up
in? So in the so he's got a lot of things going on. He's got a lot of money coming in from different businesses. In 2005, he streamlined his money flows and consolidates all of his debts into one new low-interest loan of 700 million with Barclays. It's like Barclays are representing a few different banks, but for the sake of the story, it's just Barclays. So he's now got all of his money consolidated into one easy-to-pay loan, and he sent that to Barclays, who at the time decided that he didn't need any personal guarantee or any security. They were just like, pay it back whenever you can.
Well, in fairness, he's a sound man who has successful businesses.
Yeah.
And he made it all himself pulled up by his own bootstraps. So I think, and here's the thing, Kev, if no one before ever needed any kind of a deposit or any kind of guarantee, why would Barclays?
Why indeed? So in October 2005, and this is where we get to the crux of the story, I guess. Sean Quinn started investing in Anglo-Irish Bank using CFDs, which are contracts for difference. So, like, I spent a while trying to figure out what this is, and if it doesn't make any sense, it's because it's fucking stupid. It's a financial derivative that allows you to bet on the price of a share without actually owning the share. So you go to your broker, you say you want to put a CFD on, and if the price of the share goes up, you then get the difference between what you paid and what the price ends at. If the price goes down, you pay the broker the difference. And by using CFDs, you only pay a percentage of what the actual share price is, and that's known as the margin. So your profits will be like a multiple of the margin. It means you can make an awful lot of money quickly off of it, but your losses would also be a multiple of the margin. So if the share price starts going down, you lose a lot of money quite quickly. If it goes up, you can gain a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the main advantages are that you can use this margin thing to leverage so you can get higher returns, but also you don't have to pay stamp duty on it because you're not actually buying a share, and you don't have to disclose that you've done it. So you don't have to publicly say, so if Sean Quinn bought shares of the company outright, he'd have to announce that he owns X amount of Anglo. But with this, you don't have to.
Okay. I think I've got it.
Yeah. So like, because I kept trying to get it into my head, and I was like, no, that can't be it. That's just stupid. Why would you be able to do that? If that's what you're thinking, that's what it is.
That's exactly what it is, yeah.
It's like, there's no reason, and no, if you want to bet on a share going up and down, have at it. You should be able to do that through Paddy Power, Boyle Sports, whatever. You shouldn't be able to do that in fucking a broker. You shouldn't be able to do that as a financial something that can affect the financial markets.
Anything with the financial markets, it's not meant for us. It's meant for the people who like the rich people who kind of understand it, or they have even more smart people who don't have as much money as them who tell them what to do.
Yes.
Like, no one really knows what's going on. Same as the GameStop thing that happened earlier in the year, and then when it all went to shite, they were like, right, okay, new laws.
Everything you said is very relevant to what's going to happen here. So for a maximum return, I kept going back and forth because there's so many different law firms and so many different consultancy people in this, but I kind of want to highlight a couple of them. So for maximum returns on these CFDs, the consultants, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, they're like a big consultancy firm in Dublin.
I think they have a place down in Kilkenny as well.
Yeah, they're big in Belfast as well. So they advised them.
We're just going to go tit for tat of places where PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Yeah, where else the big, Jason?
Yeah.
You ever heard of PwC?
Limerick, fucking Boston. I believe they've got a subsection in maybe Austin somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah. If that's true. So he brought in PwC to advise him on these contracts for differences that he bought. And they told him to set up an offshore business to handle the CFDs in Madeira, off the coast of Morocco, where you only had to pay 3% corporation tax. And then you can pay the dividends back into EU companies free of charge. And the company was known as Baisley.
Great, well that solves all of his problems.
Well, he didn't even have any problems, Jason. The only problem that he didn't have to pay any tax on it. I don't know. Yeah, this is the start of the ridiculousness of the financial sector. He's just hired some company to come in and tell him how best to hide his winnings from this ridiculous bet that he's placed on a bank.
I don't find it that ridiculous. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with it. I just think that it's like, that's exactly what I've expected to have happened.
I wonder how, like, yeah, I don't know how these things even get started, because it's not as if he knew. Like, at what point when you start getting rich, does someone just show up one day and they're like, oh, here's how to pay as little tax as possible? It's not as if you would have known these guys growing up.
I think that's exactly what happens. I mean, I think it's the same with any type of success. Like, you could do it with, like, with stand-up, like, or like acting, or, like, you know, famous people, fighters, whatever. Once you get so good at the thing that you do that someone notices how talented you are, but they're like, oh, they don't have any, like, platform yet, I will bring them everything but take 10%.
Yes,
you know, like, I will hide all of your money, but you will give me 1%.
That is very much how they operate. So he's getting the money for these CFDs from Quinn Finance and Quinn Group Family Properties, which are two companies that are outside the main Quinn Group umbrella. And on those two companies, he's got three of his most trusted lieutenants in charge, namely Liam McCaffrey, Kevin Lunny, who we talked about earlier, and Dara O'Reilly, the holy trinity of the Quinn Empire. There were like three lads that
The Holy Quinnity.
The Holy Quinnity. I'm amazed I hadn't seen that written down before. They were three local lads that he'd hired when they were in their early 20s and had promoted them into positions of powers based on their loyalty. He basically picked these three lads and just promoted them up through the ranks, gave them a shit ton of money, and they were his men. So he's taking money from those companies, pumping them into the CFDs, and it's paying off. Anglo was doing really well because they were making their money off the housing boom. The share price was rising, and by the end of 2006, his initial 20 million bet on Anglo was worth €100 million.
Oh,
that's how it's done.
A seventh of what he owes.
Well, no, so the money he set up with Barclays, and again, this is just something that me and you are too poor to understand, but apparently that's just how businesses operate. They always have massive loans. They're always just sort of paying them back slowly.
Yeah, I can't do that. Like, I want to get a deposit on a house. And the idea of a mortgage terrifies me. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that now anymore. Because it's like a commitment. I can't stay in a relationship for 6 weeks, never mind a house for 35 years.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, he can't do it either.
But unless I can buy something right then and there, it's like, no, I can't. Like, you know, if my paycheck was the next day, I'm waiting for the next day. My dad has that instilled in me. It's like the world's about to end at every single moment. We're all about to go into post-World War II recession. Germany. Bread is going to cost €1,000 per loaf.
You're going to feel really stupid sitting in your empty house trying to pay off your mortgage and fight back Stalin's 1945 Russian troops.
Although I hope that's not me though, when I'm like still 75, where I'm like, no, keep it. You better put it away for a rainy day because you never know. It's over, Jason. That's done.
You know, at this stage,
there's nothing left. You've no wife and kids. You've no friends left. There's like, no, but just in case.
In March 2006, the government wanted to start taxing CFDs, but PwC and the Irish
bastards. What? To give it back to the poor, to these people working hard for their money.
It's sickening, but luckily, PwC and the Irish Stock Exchange lobbied the revenue to reconsider. They told them that CFDs were mostly being used by foreign investors and only for short periods, which was an absolute lie, and they would have known that because they set up the CFDs for Sean Quinn. But listen, within 2 weeks of the tax being proposed, the Minister for Finance said it would be reassessed, and it was never mentioned again. That minister's name? Brian Cowan.
Oh.
Which, like, I don't know what his background is either.
Kev, like I'd said earlier, Offaly has $1 million.
But, like, I was going to say no harm to him, but because it's not his fault, it's the system's fault, really. But, like, you know, I didn't know what a CFD was.
If it's your job. If it's your job.
But why is it his job? Why isn't it an accountant's job? Like, I'm not saying, Brian, like, I don't know. I mean, if PwC come in with a couple of fancy graphs and they're like, actually, Brian, you shouldn't tax these because there's no point. Why would you bother? What are you going to spend the money on? Roads? It's the boom times. You don't need taxes.
I know, but it's like he's the minister for it.
So, he is, but why is he the minister for it?
But he has a background in it, I assume. Like he's done.
I don't think
he's
he
probably,
does.
He was probably a school teacher. He's probably done business.
Yeah.
He's got a clear understanding of large multi-billion-dollar deals. That's
Of
fine.
course.
I was going to say it is his fault because it's the same as if someone turned around to me and was like, Jason, would you like 150,000 a year to go be a minister in the Dáil? I'd say, well, I would like that money, but I can barely keep my head afloat doing the regular thing. I'm not the man for that job. So why do all of these ministers take the positions of go be the head of this role of 3 or 4 things that you have no fucking experience in ever?
Because
you can do it, but if you make a balls of it, yes, you're directly responsible. Not why were they put in that position? They said yes.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I would say they took the job because you can almost guarantee that whilst PwC was telling him it was a bad idea to tax this ridiculous fucking gamble that people were doing, I'm sure that meeting was held on the back of a yacht. And
yes. Oh, of course, yeah.
That's where you take it. But listen, that's the last we'll hear about Brian Cowan in this story.
Really?
So later on, no. So later on in 2006, in the first 6 months of 2006, Quinn Financial Services had made €123 million in profit. The Quinn Group as a whole would show $430 million profit for the year. And to capitalize on his success, he started issuing bonds. So again, bonds make more sense than CFDs. Is basically he himself becomes a lender, sort of. So he's offering 5 to 10 year loans with 5 or 6% return. So people invest money in the company, and in return you get a bond that pays out 5 or 6% every year for 5 years, and then you get the capital back. So it's a way for a company to raise funds. It's a good deal.
Yeah, but how much can you do that before?
Well, within a year he'd raised 600 million through bonds because he was seen as a safe bet.
But does that mean that he owes 30 million in? Oh, I suppose it's not that bad when you think about it like that. Yeah, but it's 30 million every year.
30 million every year for 5 or 6 years, but then he's using that money to expand his business and get more money.
I just can't wrap my head around it because I can't.
To the point where near the end of the story, because there's so much money involved, and then at the tail end it starts getting down to 8 or 9 million. I was like, why even bother? Why are you ringing me up about 8 million? What the fuck? Come on.
Yeah, who cares?
You just lost track of what money was.
Yeah, so at that stage it's like your friend turning around going, do you remember that $5 I gave you?
Yeah. What's the point? So they were all investing in him because he was seen as a safe bet. But behind the scenes, he's also ramping up his CFD position. By the end of 2006, he had CFDs over Anglo shares worth 650 million, which is roughly about 5.5% of the bank.
Okay. Wait, so he was betting on his own stock.
So I don't know if I said that actually when I was explaining the CFDs. So you don't own the stock, but your broker has to own the shares for you to bet on. They have to hold them. So he is now, on his behalf, the brokers have bought 5.5% of a bank, which is pretty crazy.
Yes. For
one man to essentially own 5% of a country's bank. That's a pretty big amount.
As well as all his other businesses. Yeah.
As well as all his other stuff.
If you just own 5% of a bank, you'd be like, that is baller.
Yeah.
No, he is way more than that. This is an afterthought.
So in early 2006, MOW, a financial service analyst, had named Anglo as the world's top performing bank for shareholder returns for the first half of the decade. These are the guys to watch. But this is an American firm, so it's now global news.
They're the guys to watch because this is all on a house of cards.
It's madness. So they managed. We'll get into some statistics now for the house of cards, but Anglo had managed to increase their business lending by 38% every year for the previous 10 years, up to 2005. Their share price had risen by 2,000% in the last 7 years.
Oh, that's a
presumably
good number.
by handing out a loan to any man, woman, child, or dog that walked into the bank and asked for it.
2 dogs in an overcoat pretending to be a child could still go in and get a loan.
Exactly, yeah.
Did your mammy say you had permission? Ruff! Okay, well, look, I
It
mean,
is pretty hard out there for a dog.
450,000 for an apartment in Leitrim doesn't seem like a bad deal. Okay, fair enough. Let's go.
Let's go, boy. And because they're doing so well, Quinn started to sell off his other CFD positions and put the profits from those into more Anglo shares. But so like after it sort of becomes, I don't think it was a secret, but like after it shows up in this MWO thing, it's now like global news that this is a hot share. And at that stage, Quinn is now buying at record highs. So this, I guess this is the sort of GameStop stuff where by the time I'm hearing about it, it's too late. That's not the time to be putting money on it.
Yeah, it's Quinternational news at that stage.
It's Quinternational news. But Quinn got in early and had made a load of money on it. And now that it's the share price has gone up, he's still buying CFDs on these new shares.
Oh,
so like,
but he's expecting it to just go again and again. Like
he is. He's like,
we just expect it to continue to rise.
yeah, exactly.
It's going to be fine.
Yeah. But
if you have no worries in life at all and just go like, what if everything has worked out perfectly? Oh, well then, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, that's his attitude at this stage. But now he's really... But before this, I think he had a fairly diverse portfolio. And now he's just like, Anglo is a rocket ship to the moon. And I'm strapping myself to it.
Well, actually, as in reference to the GameStop thing, it's the exact same nonsense where it's people who are... like, for some people, yes, they will make a lot of money. If you think that you're one of those people, like if you think that you're going to be... maybe you might be able to go on and make a couple of $100 or something. But once you start overextending yourself to, I can make hundreds of thousands here, that's when you're going to start losing... You're going to start losing like $5,000, $10,000. And who's going to make $1 million? Yeah. The person who's collectively taken on all of those $5,000 and $10,000. You're not the person. You're the cell, right? The internet exists, right? If the internet's coming to you with news and saying, this is the new hot ticket that billionaires don't want you to hear about, that is the thing that they want you to hear about.
that came from billionaires.com.
Yeah, it's madness.
So, in 2000, so this is like 2005, and he's betting all his money on the thing. He's like, it's never going to stop. Between 2001 and 2006, there were 250,000 new homes built, compared to 150,000 like 5 years before that. Before 2002, less than 40% of Irish bank assets were in property-related lending. By 2006, it was now over 60%. So 60% of all bank lending was related to building houses. 2006 was the height of the property boom. It's lucky
that we have a rich young population that's willing to have a load of kids to supplement that. We already need to fill those. Well,
but who's good? Yeah, who's so at the height of it?
We have a huge populace of well-educated people making great money who want to stay in the country and have a load of kids. I'm pretty sure that's what's happening in Ireland.
Because there's a lot of talk from the time about like it's the demographics are going this way and immigrants are going to come in and take the houses. So at the height of the property boom, we built 90,000 new houses here, which is twice as many that were built in the UK at the same time, despite the fact that the UK is 14 times the population. Mm-hmm. So we're building twice as many houses for 1/14 of the population.
You're basically saying 28 times per night, 28 times the need.
Sure, and according to the Central Statistics Office at the time, 1 in 6 dwellings was vacant.
Oh, yeah.
So you're just pumping out houses, no one's living in them, and everyone is still seeing it as like a great investment opportunity. You're a fool if you're not buying a second home. So that's like the lending investment part of it. 1/4 of all Irish men that had a job in 2006 were employed in the construction industry. So
now,
a quarter
I'd like
of
to
all
question.
jobs.
I would like to question that.
Okay,
I don't think that's true.
Why not?
I think it's far higher.
That's only taking into account the men that were getting paid in wage packets. You're forgetting about the lads who were getting cash under the table.
I'm honestly serious. I reckon that it was closer to 1 in every 2.5 or 3 men in Ireland. There was lads who weren't going to college because they were getting paid €2.50 to lay a block.
Yeah.
Like, you were getting 150, 200 a day, whatever, to labour. It was mad.
You did TY, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like TY is transition year for our friends abroad. It's like a year in second level education when you're about 15, 16, where you kind of like, you take a break after your first set of exams and you kind of, do different things, photography, art. But we would have been at the age where that was around about the time when a good few lads in my T-boy class were just there to wind out the clock so they could legally leave school and go and become carpenters or plumbers or whatever. Like, by the end of TY, you would have been 16 usually, and then everyone was just...
It was great. It was great crack.
It was great crack. I
remember being in the classroom at, like, you know, when you're like 15, 16, and the teacher's saying to lads, you're like, pay attention, because if you don't pay attention, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? You're like,
get paid.
Lads are making €2.50 to lay a brick, and there's no stop. So it's going to be, if I could do 200 bricks a day, that's €500 a day. That's $2,500 I'm taking home. Obviously, they're not real numbers, but
it's probably not far off. Like, I mean, definitely at that age, you're like,
yeah. But I mean, like, no,
so much money.
There were men out there who were doing that, who were laying like that many bricks and doing all of that. But it's not everyone. They were like the really good guys who were hardworking and dependable, not the lads who were like, oh, did you leave school at 17 so you could start making money laying bricks in a? Could you not see this is about to end?
Well, I mean, you can't blame them because no one saw this was about to end. But this
it's also you could just get your education. Just every single person just get your bare level education and then don't go to college. I'm also saying don't go to college, even in Ireland. Waste of money, giant waste of money.
Yeah. Just go out and start.
Like nowadays, bricks. Like if you're from the country and you have a kid and you're trying to try and send them to Dublin, like DCU, do you know what the rent costs are now in DCU?
I'd say
it's over $9,000 for a single room.
Jesus Christ!
And that's you're sharing with 5 people in a common room, you know, like 5 bedrooms, and you share a common area. It's over $9,000, and it's only for 9 months of the year, so you're spending over $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And that's before college or anything. It's mad. Don't send your kid to that. Take that $10,000 and say, what are you really passionate about? Fucking go do it. I don't know. I get so passionate about these things. I have no kids. I have no intention of ever doing so.
I
just hate 20 people wasting money.
In about 20 years, some kid's going to come up to you in a bar and be like, "You fucking told my parents not to send me to college."
Yes, exactly. And what did they do after? They divorced. I was probably wrong, actually. You know what? I was drinking at the time.
I missed 2 Christmases. But yeah, so you're saying there about like how how could they not have seen the end of this coming down the line? I find it hard to believe that people didn't. I think people just didn't want to talk about it. No,
people saw it because I remember like it when it was going to happen. I remember like a shout out to Dave McGrath, junior cert English teacher and leaving cert. Did he do some geography? I always loved Dave anyway, but he I remember he used to always say it. He was like, there was a teacher that left the school before I got there, and he used to always reference it, Mr. O'Malley. And he would say, Mr. O'Malley used to always say it because this same thing happened 2 decades before it.
Sure.
So like these things, even if it's not in Ireland, it's in other places. You can just see the trajectory of what's going to happen. It's not like the property bubble. It only like started in the 80s, or you know, it's gone on for a long time. But even if it's not just property, it's in a different way. You can see
different things.
Bubble. Boom, burst. And that's just how it goes. But I remember McGrath saying that to all of us when we were like 14 or 15. He's like, this can't keep going. It's nonsense. And then 4 years later, it happened. Like, well, not even, like 2 or 3. He was probably I used to think of him as a genius. He was probably just listening to David Williams.
Well, maybe.
Like, he probably just read his column every week and was like, yeah, this is mad. This shouldn't exist.
I think we talked about it before, that this is, in 2006 is the same year that Bertie Ahern gave out about the doomsayers like McWilliams, saying he didn't understand why people who moaned and complained about the economy did not commit suicide.
I do remember that, yeah.
Yes, that's future President of Ireland, Bertie Ahern there.
Do you think he will?
In January.
Say it now.
100%. He'll run.
But both of us we can both make a giant prediction on the podcast now, and both of them might come true. You can go first. Are you going to go with Bertie as President of Ireland?
He is 100% going to run. And so is Enda Kenny.
Okay. Bertie will get ahead of Enda.
Yeah.
Bertie will probably get it. I'm going to say Matthew McConaughey will be the governor of Texas before the end of 2023.
Big, okay.
And it's already happening. You can see absolutely everything that he's doing towards it already. Where you're like, oh, he's setting up a YouTube channel where he's talking about all these things. You're like, it's so fucking obvious. It's the same bullshit as when like the Air Force were like launching the Space Force and we're going to space. So what did they do? Oh, who do people like? Steve Carell? Let's just throw a bunch of money at a TV show and then make that guy the bad guy so no one realizes, why the fuck are we spending billions of dollars going into the fucking space? Like, we're going to fucking fight each other in space.
That's pretty clever.
It's so but it's so transparent, but everyone just goes, oh, I really like The Office.
Well, at the minute here, Enda Kenny is on they've started a new show on RTE, I think, called, what is it, Erin Road Kenny or something, where Enda Kenny is cycling around the country looking at old railway stations. That's a television show that's on air right now.
He's just going around going, glad I didn't invest in this, glad I didn't invest in this.
I haven't watched it, but I was listening to Celtic Ligers did a review of it. A shout out to the boys. So apparently he's just going around and like looking at railway stations and being like, God, isn't it shocking? There used to be trains going through here, if you believe such a thing. If only someone had done something. You could have done something. What are you talking about?
Well, I was going to say, it was a good couple of years ago now, but I was in a pub in my town in Loughlin, and a man I'd never met before in my life, but it was in a tiny, it was in a Jack's, and he was there having a piss. He was with my mate Dara, and I don't know what we were talking about. Your man had just turned around to us out of nowhere and said, Enda Kenny hasn't been in his constituency for 30 years. And I just don't think Ireland's a very small place. I believe that Enda Kenny's been back in Mayo in the space of like
There's no way he's been hiding in Dublin for 30 years. Maybe he was cycling home the long way.
I'm sure he'd have to. There's no more trains.
In January 2007, Quinn Group purchased what was at the time Ireland's second biggest health insurance provider, Bupa, which was rebranded as Quinn Healthcare. So with that purchase, that made Quinn the second biggest insurance provider in the country, which is a pretty big get. This is, again, a man who just started out digging gravel, and now he's running the second biggest insurance operation in the country. The same month, Sean Quinn increased his share in Anglo, his CFD stock share in Anglo, to 15%, which was at the time equivalent to about 570 million.
Ooh.
So
I realise that I've been doing that now for the whole podcast. Anytime you say a number, I'm like, oh, Jesus. At one point, you could have said €10, and I'd be like,
oh,
big boy, huh?
Nothing to sneeze at.
He's done well for himself, has he? Coming up for mana.
Oh, my God, 10 quid in his hand. No better man. So, because Ireland's a small country, word got around that Quinn was investing in Anglo. After the last round of purchases, the Sunday Times reported that Quinn had invested in Anglo CFDs covering 5% of the share prices. So it's the first time it's mentioned publicly, but the figure is also wrong. He's actually covering 15% at the time.
Okay, so it's 3 times worse than they think.
3 times worse than, yeah. Like, I don't know, I didn't read the article, but I imagine it was kind of like, wow, that's a bit mad. Imagine that, almost 5%. But in March of that year, 2007, he gave his first public speech in 10 years. So Quinn was a quiet man. In his life, he'd rarely give interviews. He was not a man for like big speeches. He also referred to himself in the third person, which is interesting.
Now, tell me this, first name or surname?
Both, actually, and constantly. Like, I've watched interviews with him, and it like is just.
Give me an example. Give me an example.
Sean Quinn knows what's good for Sean Quinn. Well, so I'll give you.
At no point in life is it ever acceptable, and everyone knows that.
No.
Like everyone knows that. Like, at what point maybe it's just like, I get so rich that now you're allowed to do it. Like,
who's going to tell him otherwise? Who's going to go up to him and be like, Sean, it's a bit weird when you refer to yourself as Sean Quinn in the third person. Well,
yeah, but
this is why he doesn't give speeches, I guess. People,
yeah,
it's for the best.
I don't know, but it's so odd. That's such a weird trait that
it makes him. I'll send you some of his interviews actually after this. It makes him look like a supervillain.
Yeah, like you can't be personable at all if you refer to yourself in the third person, even if you're doing it like facetiously. Like, if you're like messing around and joking with it, you're like, oh, Jason Brennan knows what Jason Brennan's going. No, just don't even do that.
Kevin Larney hates when people talk about themselves in the third person.
But now that we've actually talked about it for a couple of seconds, I'm like, maybe it's actually a good thing. Because I've always been saying that, like, I've been saying since the Epstein thing that, well, of course, that's what rich people do. Because, like, what our life versus theirs, it's not like, oh, how are you going to set yourself apart from the public? We're going to do the same things that the public do, but just slightly better. I'm going to wear the same clothes as them, but slightly better. I'm going to wear the same suits, there's like eat the same meals as them, but way, more expensive. It's all the same nonsense. That's eventually why they go to an island and have sex with underage children. Because they're like, what can I do to set myself apart from the public? And I've always been saying, yeah, it is sex with children. And so what's that? Like, what's the go between that? Like, surely you test out the waters before you get there. You're like, I'm not a normal member of society anymore. What could I do that I couldn't get away with if I was a regular member of the public? And one of the first things must be, what about referring to myself in the third person?
That is an excellent. That's got to be the first test of the waters to be like, am I rich? If I just start calling myself Sean Quinn, like, he definitely dropped that at a meeting. Was like, someone will call me Ed in this, and when no one said Ed, he's like, I've made it. I'm rich.
Yeah.
So he's given this speech, his first speech in 10 years, at his flagship hotel, the Sleeve Russell. He talks about how far they'd come as a company and how far they had yet to go. He's talking about himself being like a simple man with simple tastes. He doesn't have a phone, but he's still going to pursue more money. He said, Sean Quinn has always been greedy. I was never happy with whatever we had, and I was always looking for new opportunities. But now he's ready to share his wealth. I don't think it's good if all goes to the Quinn family. We were too greedy for too long, and we're still too greedy. But the intention would be, over the next few years, to leverage a lot of profits towards our management and staff. That's my final ambition in the business world.
Wait, what? He's like, after all, I'm gonna make all of this money. I'm gonna make all of this money, and at the end of it, as a way to be altruistic, I'm just going to give it to the people who work for me instead of the public.
Well, that's it, right? So, at the time, Forbes said he's worth $4.5 billion. And he's the 177th richest man in the world. And he's talking about giving his employees
right. Fair play.
Like, and he's not a mean man, because there's loads of stories of like him, handing out, like, especially in his local community, he was flat out giving money for gas stuff, got a lot of people into their houses and such. So he's not a mean man, but he also, it's like those hoarder shows. You see people and they've got newspapers from 1912. He's got 4.5 billion euro. He literally doesn't know what to do with it. And in this speech, he's like, we're going to get more. Why?
No, but he's also saying, I'm going to now in the next couple of years start giving the money out to the management and to the staff and stuff, right?
Well, yeah, but even like at 4.5 billion,
he's not, but also this is it. That's the time you do it. When you're like,
yeah.
But even after you 4.5 billion, wherever it is now, like, now's the time to give it. If he's saying over the next couple of years now, we'll start to roll it out and give it out back to the management and the staff. How much money do you need? Like, he's like, very soon we'll start to give some of the profits back to the staff. If you gave them now, if you took 2 million and just gave it out in like to the staff in terms of, here's an extra $1,000, how much that would make a difference to their lives on a fucking daily basis. Like, now is the time to do it.
You're at 4.5 billion, and it's at that stage you're like, you know what? I don't know. It's weird.
Pretty soon now, I'm going to have to start thinking about being a little bit philanthropic. Actually, I don't think he would have used that word. I think he would have said, "It's about time Sean Quinn thinks about giving something back to the community."
But it's almost not that you prefer this character, I suppose, but like, he's not buying Lamborghinis and racing them around a go-kart track. But even that sort of person, who's bathing in champagne every day, at least they're putting the money to use, even if it's just pure ego or whatever. Why is he collecting all this money? At this point, it is, and that's why I was saying we should treat it like those hoarder shows. Like, it's some sort of disease at this point.
Oh,
there's no reason to keep getting money other than he wants to be like moving up the ranks.
I'm not sure if the saying's about millionaires or billionaires, or else maybe it's just just moved on to the next one when the inflation happened like that.
Yeah.
But you're like, what does a millionaire want more than anything in the world?
Another million.
Exactly. There's no reason.
Yeah.
And you can say all you want about, like, oh, he gives back to the local community, like the GAA and that. Yeah, but he has $4.5 billion. Was he given to the GAA in every single town around Ireland, or was it just his local town? Like, it's
And
great
also,
to be a charity man in your town of 5,000 people, but that's feck all to someone who has the guts of 5 billion.
He's also actively not paying taxes. Like, he's not that he's not paying taxes, but he's paying money to the likes of PwC to learn how to avoid paying taxes. So no matter how much he gives back in charity, it's like whenever you hear about billionaires giving back to charity, it's always less than what they would be giving back in taxes, which would go to funding public parks, roads. Like, it's akin to charity, except we all get it.
There's a lot to be said for paying your taxes and then also giving to charity, like regular people do. You're a billionaire.
Yeah, exactly. You have $4.5 billion, you can afford to do both. But so yeah, I guess we were talking about like what is the point of Quinn accumulating all this money? But I think this is a classic thing that these sort of guys do. It's for the legacy. It's for his children. So like technically his 5 children owned everything. He didn't want to leave the businesses to them directly, but they were the majority shareholders and everything.
Oh, yeah, but Kevin, at the end of the day, you could make all the billions you'd want, but what the kids really wanted was time with their dad.
Well, apart from one of them, all the rest of them worked in his companies.
Well,
and they all started off with like bottom level jobs and worked their way up.
That's even worse. If I was a billionaire, I would just give my son unconditional love.
Well, no, because you want to teach them values, and you want to, like, it's a good, on paper, it's a good idea that he got them to.
No, you're right.
Yeah, they worked up the company.
I renege what I said.
But they understood
the value of not paying taxes.
They understood but they understood how the businesses worked, and then when they were promoted up, they remembered where they came from, sort of stuff. I did read one comment on Reddit from someone who apparently worked there, who says that one of his kids just spent the entire time sitting in their office checking if people had ties on or not, and that was their entire contributions to the business. Maybe that's true. Maybe he gave them an inside look at how the job is done. But so, they all had jobs in his company. He didn't want to give the money to them directly. So what he did was invest in a load of property in his kids' names all around the world, but specifically Eastern Europe, Russia, and India, because he thought those were like the hot places to invest in property. There's too many rules in Western Europe.
Bulgaria?
No, specific like Ukraine, Russia, and India is kind of like the top places. I know what you. Because there was also a big run at this time on lads buying apartments in Bulgaria.
Yeah, but also you said Eastern Europe, and then when I said Bulgaria, you were like, "No, I said Ukraine, Russia," and I was like, "No, you didn't. That's not what you said. You very much left it open ended. You basically said the Iron Corridor."
It's because I'd written here Central Europe, and then I was like, it's Ukraine. I don't know why I wrote this at this stage, but so. He was investing heavily in property in those parts of the world. In 2007, he just finished construction on his big Russian project, the Kutuzov Tower, which is some office block tower in Moscow. He'd also invested heavily in I think it was called the Ukrainia, a shopping center in Ukraine with an extremely imaginative name. He'd set up the property division to look after all these investment opportunities in the East, and it was headed up by Kevin Lunny, one of his lieutenants, and for tax reasons, it was run through a business in Sweden called Quinn Investments Sweden. And the other 2 lieutenants, Dara O'Reilly and Lee McCaffrey, were also directors of this property division. So in April of 2007, Quinn had taken out almost 800 million more in CFDs over Anglo-Irish stock. By June, he added another 655 million. So he had a profit of 200 million if he cashed out. And again, as he's putting in this new tranche of 800 million and 655, the share price is at a record high. Like at this stage, Anglo has been tipped sort of globally as the hot ticket. It's the case of the guy in the street corner is telling you about this new investment he heard about and you should get onto it quick. And even at this stage, he's like, it's going to keep going up. I'm putting wild bets on the continued share
See,
price
that's
go up.
where I don't... But that's where... Yeah, okay, can you explain why he's doing that now? Because surely
No.
at that point, he's like...
This
okay.
so this is the center point of the story. His obsession with the CFDs and Anglo, it doesn't make sense. But one of the reasons the share price was being driven up is because the brokers had to buy the shares in order to facilitate the CFDs. So they were buying up a lot of the shares, and then that drove the price up because it made it look like it was a hot property. Even though it was, but I guess it added to the illusion that it was something to buy. So the Quinn didn't own the shares themselves, because that makes sense to me in a market. Like if you like a business, you like what they're doing, you buy shares in that company. They get the money from your shares. They can keep doing what they're doing. And then you get dividends. You get a bit of a profit if they are successful. And if they aren't, you lose the money. So that's sort of 1-to-1. That makes sense to me. You can invest in something that you want to do well. The CFD thing is just like betting on a company, but having no direct input to it. So that money's not going to Anglo. He's just betting that they'll do well, which is grand if you want to do that in a bookies. But to do it through a broker causes all these issues, because then they're buying the shares from Anglo, and that is artificially inflating how many shares of Anglo are being purchased.
Yeah, well, it just doesn't make sense for that to happen.
It doesn't make sense. So another downside of the CFDs, because Ireland, again, small country, and the financial sector is even smaller, word gets out that he's doing this, that he's putting all this money into Anglo. And once word starts leaking out, even though people don't know how much money he's put into it, hedge funds figure that if he's got this large a stake in Anglo, and again, like the share price is at an all-time high, that means that it's artificially driving the price up if he's bought this much in it. So it's a good idea to short the stock. So basically, they're just going to bet that the stock's going down. Again, it's all like one or two brokers. So you can imagine like someone walking into a broker, and I'm not going to accuse anyone of any wrongdoing, but like if you go into a broker in Dublin and you're like a fucking big client and you ask them, what's the hot tip? What have you got for me? And they're just after selling Sean Quinn a shit ton of CFDs. They'd be like, well, he's heavily invested in this and there's a good chance it's going to go down. Why not short it? So the same people, the same brokers that bought the shares in order to facilitate Sean Quinn's CFDs, they then shorted those shares to other clients. So they're making money off Sean Quinn, who's betting that this price will go up. And at the same time, they're basically allowing people to bet that it will go down and bet against Sean.
Ah, they're making money both ways. Nice.
They're making money both ways. But this is one of the things that makes the least sense about this. So there's one share, and that makes sense. You know, you got a share in a company, but you can use that share multiple times. So there's only one thing, but then they're selling it to Sean Quinn to make money, and then they're selling it to someone else to make money going on.
So they are basically, it, as I understand it, and I assume most of our listeners at this point understand it far better than I do. They have a share.
Yeah.
Sean Quinn has paid them to buy a share. He's backing against the share increasing in price.
Yeah.
Right. Then, with the same share.
Yeah.
Because they don't technically own it. Or if they do it, they're not heavily invested with it. They're already making money off of Quinn backing on it going up. So then they can also talk to their other clients and say, hey, you should short this because then you'll make money.
Pretty much.
So then
now,
why do we allow that to be legal?
I would say technically it's probably not. And there's all these like, there'd be like firewalls.
I've seen Wall Street like one too many times, and I think I'm pretty sure that this is why Gecko went down. Like you can't, like you can't know that and then fucking make money off of it.
It is like technically illegal, but then there's 20 guys who work in the office and they all drink in the same bar and they're all mates with the people that they're selling these things to. So like and I'm just after rattling that off. I've got no proof of any of that, but that's just based on how Dublin works.
I think that's how the world works, but yeah.
It's how, yeah.
That's
but like Dublin Pacific is so small.
Yeah. I don't think you could bring that to a court, and then if a lawyer was like, hold on a second, Judge, Do we not drink in the same place? Actually, do you know what?
Yeah, I had an example of what shorting was, but I think we've all watched The Big Short and also lived through the GameStop thing. I think everyone has a rough understanding of it. You're basically just, they rent the share and then hope that the price goes down so that they can sell it back at a different price. But so the brokers have got it coming and going, and they're facilitating their other clients to bet on the Anglo price coming down. And by the summer of 2007, the cracks are starting to show in the property market. Anglo's bread and butter are property developers and mortgage loans, so the Anglo stock starts to take a bit of a dip. The bank was publicly denying that there was any issues, but rumours were swirling around that large corporations had pulled deposits from the bank and that international lenders were withdrawing their funding. So, the Quinn had bought the most recent of his CFDs when the stock was at like a record high. So, as soon as it started going down, he starts to hurt. And again, because of the margins, your profits are multiple of what you put in, but your losses are also a multiple of what you put in. So you can like lose a lot of money very quickly. In May 2007, the shares were at 17.56. By September, it was down to 12. So that's a pretty big drop in a couple of months. And he's just put in like hundreds of millions at that high point.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's like, but also, but it's on him. It's like, why would he buy? Like,
I don't know.
I say that, but also there's certain companies that like, if you buy Amazon stock, you're always going to make money.
I guess that was the logic with this.
Now
yeah,
but they've cornered America. Whereas, like, I don't know what's he like. What are his share? What's he invested in?
A bank that does banking good.
Yeah, but then they don't do banking goods, so then you could be like, because otherwise it would make sense to like consistently do that if it was with like Amazon. That like if you were right now, because
but then
they've taken over the entire. It's not going to be in terms of like moral. It's dodgy. Like they're a bad company, but if you want to take all your money and put it into that and then leave it like 4 or 5 years, it'll return like a giant investment.
Yeah, but that's the thing, I guess. Don't put all your money into one thing, like, because like Anglo was a safe bet, or it seemed like a safe bet at the time. That's fine, but he literally was taking his money out of other investments to put it all into this. He was funneling all his money into one thing, and that's where. And like, I know what you're saying. Like, if you put money into Amazon now, it's a sure thing. Everything's a sure thing until it isn't. Like, conceivably, I don't know. Like all the workers' union rumblings, it'd be more like what's going to come in this story. It'd be more like it turned out Jeff Bezos was secretly broke and had committed all this fraud in order to boost his booze. But no, and then when we look back and we'd be like, yeah, Jesus, in retrospect, that was actually crazy. And loads of people will lose all their money because they're like, it's a sure thing. It can't, it can't.
And that is like the history of every business that ever like fails.
Yes,
and, like, that from a big point. But
no one thinks it's going to fail.
But realistically, like we've been looking at it now for like multiple years in Amazon. So it'll happen eventually.
Yes.
It'll happen eventually. But but in terms of like people 3 years ago were saying, don't invest in them.
Yes,
they're like, well, some people did and made billions.
Well, that's the thing. And like, Anglo's been on the up. We talked about it, like the share price goes up 2,000% over 7 years. So it's exactly what you're saying. Like, people would be shouting, year 3, like, it's going to bust. Year 5, it's going to bust. Anyone who got out at any point in that still made hundreds of millions. Like, if Sean Quinn had quit early 2007, he would have made hundreds of millions off what he'd done. But instead of that, so in order for the brokers
in lieu of that decision, he decided to what, Kevin?
So in order for the brokers to make money off of these CFDs, they charge you a margin so that they don't lose out on too much money. Basically, once the price starts going down, you have to keep paying them money in order to keep your bet going. It's basically like double or nothing. Because, if they just let it run, then you suddenly owe them hundreds of millions and you can't pay it. So at all these different stages, they're like, pay us money or we pull it out now and we sell the share. So in order to keep these CFDs going, as the share price went down, he has to start paying money to these brokers, like a lot of money to them. And even the latter bunch of shares that he bought, he didn't want to let those go, because if he lets those go, so the share price is already going down. If he lets the latter bunch of shares that he bought at a really high price, if he lets all them go, all of a sudden, they all hit the market at the same time. People see all these new shares coming up. They're like, oh shit, why are people selling the shares? I better sell my share. I better sell my shares. It triggers a wave of selling shares. The share price goes down further.
The stock shorts itself.
Exactly. And then he's fucked even more on the CFDs he has from previous share points.
Yeah, so you got to put on a game face and say that everything's going good.
Exactly.
But then at the same time, you can sell the stocks that you bought at a lower rate.
Yes, yeah.
But then you're just banking on the fact that you hope you can mitigate the disaster and that it will continue to grow to the point of which that the high stocks that you bought will then eventually become the low stocks again, which is just madness.
It is crazy. So he's throwing money at this in order to like just keep it going. So the share price is going down. Quinn has to throw all this money at the CFDs to keep it going. While it's down, he figures, you know what?
Buy some more.
It's probably going to go back up again. Did you say more?
Oh my god.
Because he's buying more CFDs.
Oh.
Another 343 million euros
Okay.
onto the CFDs as the share price is falling in late 2007. Like, this must be like October 2007 when the economy, the property boom is clearly on the downturn.
He was like, it's a blip.
It's a blip. So what if there's like, what is it? 1 in 6 houses is empty in the country. We need more homes. The media at the time estimated that Quinn had CFDs covering 11% of Anglo, but in reality, by the end of September 2007, his coverage was closer to 24%, which meant that one man essentially owned a quarter of the third largest bank in the country.
Sorry. Can you say how long was the time difference between, like the time period between the estimation of 5% and now 24%?
A couple of months. I think that 5%. I'm just looking back here. It was the start of the year, I think.
Jesus, I know we'll get on to it later in the podcast, but like when it all went to shit, it must have really been like a Renham type moment in the IT crowd.
Oh
You're like,
yeah.
Oh, the money men are here to see you. Oh, fantastic! Out the window.
I'm sure there's some people asking about my accounts. So he's got a crazy stake in the business. So over the year, Anglo management.
Filet mignon.
Anglo management could see that their stocks were being bought up by brokers rather than actual investors, which is a sign of CFDs and short tradings. It means that people are like betting on your shares rather than actually buying them for investments. And again, like the news was sort of leaking out. So they were aware that Quinn had some percentage of stake in the bank, but they didn't know how much it was. And like one thing stock markets don't like is uncertainty. Even if things are shit, as long as the markets know that it's shit, you can work with that. But if you have a case where an individual has a large percentage of your bank and you don't know what his intentions are, you don't know how much he owns, he might sell all his shares tomorrow and flood the market, which would fuck them, or he could be looking to buy the bank because he's bought over all these other businesses. If they see, here comes Sean Quinn, he's buying up all these shares in the bank, maybe he's trying to take us over. So on September 11th, 2007, the Anglo Dream team of David Drum and Sean Fitzpatrick.
I was going to say, it really sounds like it's like season 6 or 7 of Peaky Blinders. So, all right, we've taken the next thing. What are we going to do now?
Yeah.
Just the fucking...
What if I'm a bank now?
Yeah, what if I own banks? What if I...
I mean, I don't know what would have happened if he did buy the bank. I guess... I don't know. If he bought 51% of the bank, does he just own the bank?
He's just as unhappy as he was beforehand.
Well, yeah, true. So the dream team of David Drum and Sean Fitzpatrick from Anglo went to meet with Quinn and his lieutenant Liam McCaffrey to find out his intentions with Anglo. Sean Fitzpatrick would later say that he was physically shook when they found out that Quinn's stake was 24% of the bank. In Quinn's eyes, he was just investing.
They were worried that he was Mike Tyson.
What do you mean?
Because he got bad intentions.
In Quinn's eyes, he was just investing in a business he liked. He appreciated their go-get-'em attitude, and he didn't understand the lad's negative reaction to his size of the share. If anything, he figured he should be annoyed at them because his CFDs were now depreciating, and he wanted to know what the state of the bank was, how it was performing, when he'd get some of that money back. But Drum and Fitzpatrick were worried about the fallout from this. There were already signs of a global credit crunch at this stage, and if things went south and the central bank found that one man owned a quarter of the shares, it'd be bad news for everyone. So Drummond Fitzpatrick try and explain to him it's bad for him to have bought all these shares. It's bad for the bank. It shouldn't, like, if it gets out into the public, it'll be bad news. The central bank won't like it. It's just an all-around bad idea. And they're like, you should definitely sell off some of these shares, unwind your position, and we'll just, say no more about it. Quinn says he'll take it under advisement. And what do you reckon's the first thing he does when he's walks out of that meeting?
Now I'm from the country, so
he does what any reasonable man would do.
I was going to say hedge your guess. I'm going to hedge your guess.
Yeah,
the hedge school.
He's hedging something.
He bought more stocks.
By the end of the month, his share was at 28.5% of Anglo-Irish
Good
Bank.
man.
No one's good at. He knew they were hiding something from him. If the bankers are calling you and telling you don't be buying shares, that's because they know the inside track. They're trying to keep something from you.
Wow.
Now, up until this point,
that is another level.
Well, it's going to go to another level, and this is where we're going to wrap up part one of this whole thing. So
I'm loving this, by the way. I'm so glad you picked this as a topic.
This is only the start of the fucking madness. So up until this point, Quinn had been funding the CFD purchases by taking out loans through his various companies, or by the profits from his companies, or like using his companies to get credit to buy the loans. But as the global financial situation got more precarious in 2007, he couldn't borrow as much as he'd previously done. And remember Baisley, the company he'd set up in that island off Morocco to fund the CFDs? Yes. They're getting hammered with demands from the brokers to cover the margins. So he's getting charged, if he wants to keep these CFDs going, they have to pay to keep it going. And all of a sudden he can't get money from his usual places. So he figures, who has as much interest in me paying these margins as I do, as Sean Quinn does? Who else could lend the money?
Anglo-Irish Bank.
My God, you've got it. So
he gets Anglo-Irish Bank to give him a loan to continue to pay back the stocks that are being shorted. So that,
he gets them.
What the fuck?
And this is why I think
we're in the twilight zone.
No, this is where we go into pure cowboyism, and this is why this is a cowboy special. Between Quinn Group and Anglo, they come up with a plan whereby
Yeehaw!
So
Help the boys! Here we go! Over the mountain! Into the under! Hurry!
Don't try to understand them. Just rope and throw and brand them.
The sunset is nothing but brown envelopes.
Come on.
Here we go, boys.
This is it. Why don't... It makes so much sense. I need money to pay for these shares, and you want the share price to keep paying up. Let's just fucking help each other out. So they come up with a deal.
A quid pro quo.
Except there was nothing free about this, Jason. So they come up with a deal whereby Darragh O'Reilly, one of the lieutenants, and the director of Quinn Finance, he would calculate how much Baisley needed to cover the margin calls from the brokers. Anglo would write up loans for literally hundreds of millions to various Quinn holdings under the guise of like property development. They'd say it's for property development. They'd send them out to different Quinn companies, and then that would get pumped into paying the brokers to keep the bet going. Anglo agreed to keep this up until they could figure out what to do about the CFDs. In December 2007, with an eye towards the end of year fiscal report, Quinn asked Anglo for another $500 million to help cover the flow of money going through Baisley, just to smooth out the books. Anglo gave him the funds, again as a property development loan. This is all like when the property's going down, and they're sending out hundreds of millions to this man under the guise of like buying more property.
But
that's
I've never understood that though, because people always say, like, don't throw good money after bad.
Listen.
But if you throw enough good money, maybe it'll change the other lad's opinion, and they'll be like, actually, no, we should come back, and no, we should no, we'll stop being dicks about that now.
This story is the definition of throwing good money after bad. But so because he set up Baisley in his children's name, all this stuff had to be signed off by his kids. But apparently the practice at the time was just to send the signature sheet to them. They had signed it without reading what the document was. It would go back to Anglo. Anglo would give the money to Darragh O'Reilly for property, and the money would then pay the brokers. to keep doubling down on the bet that the share price of a bank that was about to collapse would somehow tick around. So at the start of 2008, and this is where we'll end this part, Sean Quinn's personal wealth was estimated at 4.7 billion, making him the wealthiest man in Ireland, the wealthiest person in Ireland, and the 164th wealthiest person on the planet at the time. But behind the scenes, he owed the Barclay banks and the Quinn bondholders that he'd given money out. He owed them 1.3 billion. And he was about to rack up another 2 billion with Anglo. But he was the richest man going.
I don't know. I've forgotten so much about like what I've heard at the time. Like, I don't know what happens and when. So I'm kind of like, damn, if you just like pulled out now.
Yeah.
Like, even like worst case scenario, if you pulled out now, you're still left with over $1 billion, right?
Oh, like, there's so many points in this story where, and this is why by the end of it, I have no sympathy for him, and I don't think you will as well by the end of it. Like, he's he starts off, he's just
yeah, Kev, that's it. Yeah, you've known me for a couple of years.
Yeah, I was giving you I don't know, I was trying to solve it there. You hated him for the second. He was like, he's from Fermanagh, scumbag.
Yeah, I don't have sympathy for billionaires. Yeah. I don't have sympathy for like people like. I don't
he
know,
got £100 loan from his dad to fucking dig in the ground. Soft. £100, fuck's sake.
Soft. Do it yourself.
Dig with your hands.
Pull your bootstraps up. If you don't have boots, just pull up some straps.
Yeah.
You can afford straps at least. If you can't, what are you doing?
What are you at? Well, I don't. Yeah, even if you don't remember much, you'll remember that 2008 is not a great year, economy-wise, for the country. So that's the situation. That's his setup now, leading into it.
Yeah, I just want to know. It's going to be so tough to not just Google everything now, and because you've said documentaries, and I want to go look at these documentaries.
Did you?
I'm sure they've done a better job with it than you have.
To be honest,
so I'm kind of
there's very few documentaries on this because it's so raw, and because he's a very litigious man, and there's several ongoing court cases. Which brings me to my next point. We talked about it a bit in the intro, but in case you missed it, we'll level with you. There's going to be 2 episodes of this story out for free, and that's going to cover a whole story. You just heard one of them. That's the rise of Sean Quinn. The next one, we're going to give the fall of Sean Quinn. I mean, the continued possible rise of Sean Quinn.
To be honest, I'm much like Sean himself, and I'm backing on the continued rise. I think he's right. It's gonna. I've forgotten what happened over the last 13 years. We're just going to roll right ahead.
He's due a bounce. It's time to double down. Get all the money out of everything else. Put it into Quinn. So, like, by the end of the second story, you'd be like, damn, that was interesting as hell. I can't believe all that stuff happened. But then there'll be a third episode, a third part, which deals with what happened after the end of this current story, which is genuinely, like, if none of this stuff happened, it would be also just as crazy and just as interesting. And that story will be behind a Patreon wall. Mostly as a marketing tool, but also because it will have some more salacious. It's because a lot of it is still current stuff. There's a lot of ongoing court cases, and I'm going to start making some connections between various people and various groups that I'd rather just not have on a free episode.
And I would usually sit here silently, but because it's behind a paywall, I'm willing to say what I think.
Exactly. If you want to hear Jason Brennan let loose, that's worth the money alone.
By the time we actually release it, we'll have a payment structure in plan. We might do one where you can buy a monthly subscription or access to the episode and a t-shirt or some other merch, or figure it out in some way. But we will have that for you once this is actually out. We'll link to it on the Instagram and such.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, it's good to be back. Hope you're all doing okay. And see you next week.
Shafter.
Good luck.